Can I give you a pat on your back? Would that help? Okay. Gentlemen, as we're beginning Sefer Melachim, the Book of Kings, and we want to understand Aleph, throughout the Sefer, we're not told who's the author. We're not told who's the author. Number two, if the Tanakh ended the book of Shmuel with the events of David HaMelech, and it begins here in the book of Kings, again with events of David HaMelech, why not combine all matters of David inside one book of prophets? Why separate them? As some of you know, after the book of Yoshua, Sefer Shoftim, Shmuel, now we come to Sefer number 4 of the book of prophets. Number 4 and end, final, of what we call the early prophets, Nevi'im Rishonim. From David lying on his deathbed, here it seems almost, to the end of the Sefer, the exiling of the last king of Judah, Tzidkiyahu, and the destruction of Temple 1, a period of 400 years expire. The Talmud in Masechet Baba Batra does tell us who is the author of this Sefer, and that it's Yirmiyahu. Interesting. Yirmiyahu is the one that authored, prophetically of course, Sefer Melachim, and his own Sefer called Yirmiyahu, and the book of Eicha, Lamentations. And these are all authored by Yirmiyahu. In other words, from the outstanding view of 400 years that happened prior to his time, he's being told by Hashem what events to write, what events not to record. Anything and everything in this Sefer has value and importance for future generations. As the Talmud explains, that there are a lot of events that were not recorded. There are many events that happen to kings that are recorded, but many that are not recorded. In fact, later on in the Sefer, we'll see a pattern. And the rest of the things that happened to the king are recorded in Sifrei Divrayim, in the book of Chronicles of those times, which is not the book of Chronicles we have in our time. So Yirmiyahu is putting this Sefer together. A lot has been written by the great scholars like the Abarbanel in Spain and the Malbim later on in Europe. What is the reason for the dichotomy or the division between Shmuel and here? In the book of Shmuel, we read about the authority and the leadership of the prophets, leading the Jewish people. That period of Nevi'im prophets is in the aftermath of Sefer Shoftim. We've said a few times, the book of Shoftim, I heard from Rav Levanon in Elon Moreh. I was once I was once translating for a rabbi. You heard that? I was once translating for a rabbi. We had a Shabbos together with our students in the Shomron in Elon Moreh. And this great rabbi has been the rabbi of the Yishuv for more than 45 years. Rabbi Levanon is his name, in Elon Moreh, just above Shechem. And he's giving a shiur to our students in Hebrew, and I'm translating like I do for a bigon. And I didn't know the Rav's English was so good. And when he was saying a sentence, and I translated for him, and I said the book of Shoftim in English is called the book of Judges, like it appears in probably all your Tanachim in English. He stopped, and he corrected me. And I will understand. This is something an episode that happened about more than 20 years ago. When you were a little boy then, right? And then,
No, 24.
Okay, gentlemen. And then he explained to me, the book of Shoftim are not judges because the leaders that appear in that Sefer are not judges that sit in a Beit Din, in the court of Israel. But rather, they're leaders that rose to the occasion to defend the Jewish people in the land of Israel. and overcome militarily the opposition of whatever entities that rose up against Israel in the land. And therefore their leaders. God judged the Jewish people through the leaders, but he thinks it's not a good term to use the word judges. The word shofet means a leader. Now, the leaders in the book of Shoftim, we don't see a continuation like we see in the kingdom. In the laws of kings, often, in the Jewish people as well, when a king passes away, who takes over?
His son.
Right? What is that called?
Inheritance.
Inheritance of the kingdom. That is not the case of Shoftim. We don't see an inheritance of a shofet by his son. And therefore, there's a wide representation of leaders from each and every tribe almost during 400 years. The book of Shoftim, what's called mistakenly by the judges in English, the one before Samuel, before Shmuel, is for a gap of about 400 years. About. What happened in the book of Shmuel? A new leadership. We come to a time that the Torah is going to be handed down by prophets. Do you recall the initial chapter of the Ethics of the Fathers? How the Torah is handed down? Moshe kibel Torah misinai. Umsara liYoshua. V'Yoshua uzkenim leNeviim. Remember that handing down of Torah. Moshe received the Torah at Sinai. He transferred it over to Joshua. He was the leader of Torah insemination. And then Yoshua to the Zkenim. Who are the Zkenim? The elders of the generations. Some of the Shoftim were scholars in Israel, but most of them were, one was a cowboy like Yiftach HaGiladi, the other Gidon, and others. They were not necessarily scholars of Israel. But that period of time between Yoshua and the prophets, we had elders in every generation like Otniel ben Kenaz, who was a shofet and a scholar. What happens after these 300 plus years? A new era begins. In the era of the Shoftim, more than 300 years, close to 400 years, prophecy is scarce. Scarce. How do you pronounce the word? Scarce. Thank you, sir. You can hardly find a prophet. Then, as the sanctuary, the tabernacle, the Mishkan in Shiloh is destroyed by the Plishtim in Shiloh, a new era begins, and that is prophecy. Shmuel Samuel has a lot of prophecy. After him, Natan Navi. After him, God. The book of Samuel is distinguished in a shift of leadership, authority given to the prophets to be the leaders of Israel. During the time that they are leaders, the people are asking, saying, hey, this prophet I think is a little too heavy for us, too religious, or maybe we need a king to fight the wars. And that's when they rise to think of an idea, which is not the right time. But if God says that's what they want, I'm going to give it to them. They ask for a king like all the nations. And therefore God appointed, through the prophet Samuel Shmuel, the first king called Saul. That's right, Shaul, Saul. Saul lost his kingdom. He had several flaws amongst his righteous character traits. He was a winner. He was a successor. He was a military leader as well. He was very tall and strong. Yet his kingdom was a temporary kingdom. Because all of you know that Shaul came from which tribe? Benjamin. And we know that the kingdom should be handed down to which tribe? Yehuda. That leads us to the second part of the book of Shmuel. God, through the prophet, 3 times gives the order to Shmuel to crown David. The first time it's done clandestinely, secretly. And then it appears, and it appears big time. The ruling of David belongs to Sefer Shmuel. Why? Because the book of Kings is going to show us now another transition from the temporary kingdom of Shaul to the beginning of the kingdom of David. But the book of Kings will show us that the kingdoms of Israel will be inherited one to the other. Of course, remember, the kingdoms of Israel are not just a political entity. We're talking about the kings of the nation of God. And they will be handed down, not like the Shoftim, but through family, inheritance. When will this begin? With the kingdom of Shlomo. He will be the first one to be handed down in the family from David. We're going to have a new concept in Tanakh called Beit David. Beit David will mean the handing down of the kingdom from David to Shlomo. A major crisis, as you read chapter 1, happens where people are thinking they can pull a quickie and have Adoniah become the new king. And there are people collaborating with him, including the former chief of staff called Yoav. But that will not work, and David gets out of his bed like a lion and roars and becomes very active and takes public and tells everyone what was quiet partially until now, an oath or a prophecy that Shlomo will be king. So my dear friends, we're going to be learning in the Sefer the yachas, the relationship between the kings of Israel and prophecy. Furthermore, the kings of Israel and a Beit HaMikdash. We're going to be learning about the upcoming building of the Beit HaMikdash. And that what was unique for the book of Kings, which is not for the book of Shmuel, which maybe gives us light to what the point that we said yesterday. The ending of Sefer Shmuel, in contrast to the ending of chapter 21 in Divrei Yamim. In the book of Divrei Yamim, the book of Chronicles, put together by Ezra Sefer, there it stated the making of Beit Hashem, which alludes to some sort of pseudo-holy temple. And that and the Mizbeach was built by David after he bought the property from, remember his name?
Pira, not Pira.
Who did he buy the threshing floor from? Aravna, Hayevusi, the Jebusite. That the Talmud says was a Ger Toshav. He was a righteous member of... How'd you know I wanted another one? Thank you, sir. Yeah, I need more Torah, guys. It'll keep me off the streets. Okay? In Sefer Shmuel, Beit Hashem is not mentioned. He built a Mizbeach. Maybe they made a structure over this Mizbeach. It's not clear, but that's what it says in Divrei Yamim. The book of Kings will show us the relationship, the connection between the kings of Israel and the future and the building of the temple and the maintenance of the temple. So my dear friends, this book by large, at least part 1 of the Sefer, will deal a lot with Shlomo, the son of David HaMelech, over all of Israel. And we'll further see another 20 kings of Judah, Yehuda, that ruled over the course of 400 years, including 393 years of Bayit Rishon. In addition, unfortunately, I don't want to spill the beans now, but you have to know it anyway. There's going to be a division. There's going to be a ripping up, a tearing up of a one united kingdom of the Jewish people. And we learned about the 20 Malchei Ephraim, the 20 kings of Ephraim, the area that you live in, which is really Ephraim.
Oh, they really had 20. Ephraim Chaim had kings
Can
also?
that, of course.
I thought only Yeshua ben Nun.
No, sir. We're talking about the division. After Achia Shiloni splits up the kingdom, and we'll learn about the northern Israel kingdom that will rule for a period of some 240 years. And that's why the Balei Misorah, the scholars that are handing down the tradition of the Tanakh, gave the name Sefer Melachim. You follow? We're going to be learning about events that are related to the kings, the prophets, and the Beit HaMikdash that have, for us, a practical application for us in our generations. You should know, though, when in the Greek period, when the Greeks were ruling over the land of Israel, and they wanted to wipe out the wisdom of the Torah, and they outlawed, as some of you study Jewish history, the study of Torah. There we have the Septagon, where 70 Greek scholars, the Greeks forced 70 scholars of Israel into separate rooms and questioned them and saw how the same answers came out. And Dafka, according to those Shivim Zkenim, the 70 elders, they put together Sefer Shmuel and Melachim, together and divided into two books. What we have today, Melachim Aleph and Melachim Bet, is a later division for practicality. But according to the Septagon, Sefer Shmuel and Melachim were combined together but separated into two Sfarim. Like I said before, we don't see who's really writing the Sefer, but Chazal tell us in Baba Batra that Yirmiyahu is the chief prophet author of this Sefer. But the truth is, and by the way, you can see parallel language between the book of Yirmiyahu, Jeremiah, and the book of Melachim. You can see style. Every prophet has his own style, even though God is prophesizing him. You can see similarities between Sefer Melachim and Sefer Yirmiyahu, since they're both authored by Yirmiyahu. But the fact of the matter is, in this book we see a concept called B'nai Nevi'im. There's an academy at university, an academy for Nevi'im students. Would you like to fill out a form, register?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll give you the prerequisites after sure, and let's see if you fit the. He's the one that goes through all the registration forms. He sees if your prerequisites are.
You could have a hammer and you can.
My dear friends, the term B'nai Nevi'im, which appears in our Sefer, the truth of the matter is 12 prophets throughout the Sefer of these 400 years are prophesying in this book. 10 of the 12, or 9 of the 12 I found, their names are mentioned, like Natan HaNavi in the opening chapter, Achia Hashiloni, Shmaya, Yehu, Eliyahu. We've heard of Eliyahu HaNavi, Elijah. What's the name of his student, his disciple? Elisha. Yonah will be mentioned here, Yeshayahu. Yes. And also a woman prophet called?
Devorah.
She was in Sefer Shoftim. Chulda HaNeviah. Where is the Chulda junction in Israel? Named after her? Do you know where that is, sir? No, not now. Do you know where it is? When you go on the Latrun Road and you want to turn to Rehovot, that junction is called Chulda HaNeviah. Okay. Okay. One of the major themes of the Sefer, the Abarbanel says, is to see how the generations of the Jewish people branch out from David to Shlomo and the great events from one king to the other king. Plus, we're going to learn about their righteous behavior or the opposite, their wicked behavior. Okay? We'll learn about the rewards that they're going to be getting and maybe punishment that they're going to be getting. All this is according to the divine truth of the prophet. So, let's begin reading right now and raise some basic questions so we can begin touching upon it later on. Perek Aleph, Pasuk Aleph, Amelech David Zaken ba bayamim, vayichasu ba begadim velo yicham lo. Weird. Why do we have to be told by Yirmiyahu that his clothing doesn't heat his body? Vayomru lo avadav. This could be the doctors talking here. Yivakshu laduni hamelech nara betula, ve'amda lifnei hamelech utila sochenet, ve'shachva bechekecha v'cham laduni hamelech. What? Sounds like already an immodest rated movie. Yeah, I mean, what's going on here? Because his body cannot keep his temperature, so bring a young girl who's a virgin girl and let her be beside the king, and maybe she'll warm his body up. What's going on here? What kind of story is this? Did Yirmiyahu take advice with you? No. Pasuk Gimel, Vayivakshu nara yafa b'chol gvul Yisrael. Would you believe this? They went all over the country to find her. Vayimtzu, and they found her at Avisha Gashunamit. Vayivu Telamelech. Wow, weird story. Pasuk Daled Vanara. We're told not only is she yafa, but she is what? Yafa ad me'od. Superlatives here. Okay, what kind of story is this? Vatila Melech Sochenet. What is? Should we explain at least the word sochenet? Rashi says mechamemet. She's there to warm up the body. Vatisharteu. And she's serving him. Vamelech lo yida'ah. Meaning, he's not interested in a wife. He's not interested in having relations. He's already defeated his Yetzer Hara. Some of you know David HaMelech has had many wives until now, plus concubines. He's had the limit. He has no interest in having marital relations. Okay? And by the way, imposed on the king of Israel, some of you know, is a prohibition. Lo yarbelo nashim. He's not allowed to have a multiple number of nashim according to the oral Torah.
Then how come Solomon had so many wives?
Great question. We'll get to that chapter. Okay? Here Rashi says, name of Chazal, he already had 18, which is the number. Let me tell all of you, one is enough. Okay. You know very well. Okay? Gentlemen, a very weird opening of the Tanakh here. And certainly we're talking about one of the Giborim of the Jewish people that ever lived, and that is David. When we say Gibor, we don't only mean that he has a spear and other weapons, and he overcomes his enemies. But as Chazal taught us in Pirkei Avot, when they rhetorically asks, Miwa Gibor, and they answer Hakovesh et Yitzro, the one that can control his Yetzer Hara, that is David. Because here it seems that David is withstanding any trial here, conquering his Yetzer, not having any relations. And it's interesting to know who's not here in the scene? His wife. She doesn't appear here. We're going to learn even that she doesn't even have access all the time that she would want to. So it's a weird opening. We're going to have to discuss this as we go on. Vadoniyahu Pasuk 5, Ben Chagit mitnasei lemor ani emloch. Vayas lo rechiv ufarashim v'chamishim mishvatzim lefanav. In the backyard, in this other side of town, one of the sons of David, like some of the others, he went off of the derech, deviated from the path. And he's taking the gall to declare that he's going to take king. Who asked him? What did he put 10 cents in a bumblebee, what is it called? Mastic. He wanted some gum, and he's winning the war. Gentlemen, right now, when it says David Zaken Baba Yamim, you get the idea that he's total inactive. No activity. Lying in bed. His medical situation is such that he can't what? He can't preserve his body temperature. They're looking for a solution, an outside solution. And maybe they're finding a solution. We're not even told. Does it do it or not? What we are told is that the king doesn't know her. Lo yada'ota. The word yediyah, as we learned in Breshit, ve'adam yada et chava ishto, the word to know is the sign language of the Tanakh for intimacy, intimate relations between a man and his wife. And here it says he doesn't know her. He has no relations with her. So Aleph, he's koveshet yitzro. Bet, David is totally inactive here. Inactive. People are doing things for him. They're calling the shots, right? They're bringing an outsider, a woman, apparently a gorgeous-looking girl who has never had relations, and her body must be very warm. And we're not told, is it working or not working? And then we're going off to see what's going on in the backyard of David. Adoniah, other new problems. No, he thought that David was on Easy Street. You wanted to call him David Easy Street HaMelech, right? But the truth is, he hasn't been on Easy Street ever. He's had hard problems all his life, to the extent where people thought that his grandmother's gior is not a proper gior, and people badmouthed him, didn't accept him. And here, if he didn't have problems, he had problems with his son and daughter called Amnon and Tamar. He's had problems with his son that rebelled, Avshalom. Now with one bullet did he shoot in order to take over from Hebron into Yerushalayim. And Adoniah, and now Adoniah. The problems with this other son. Maybe they think that what? No one is taking over. No one is ruling. Now it's my chance. Now, the Tanakh here tells us some criticism in verse 6. V'lo atzavo aviv miyamav lemor, madua kacha asita. V'kam hu tov toar me'od, v'oto yalda acharei Avshalom. On a personal, family level, from a parental point of view, David never gave criticism to Adoniah. Why did you do this? Why did you do that? Today, I had an interesting phone call with a top psychiatrist, Harvard graduate, former student of Machon Meir many years ago. And I saw him on the road, he waved, and then I called him up. We were talking in a traffic jam on the phone. And I asked him how he's doing. And often we as parents, when we have our first child, we often mistakenly criticize them time and time again. Why? It's our first child. We're rookies in parental education. And we so much desire that our first kid be a proper child, acting this way and acting that way. So interesting, this guy was really, really very unique. He says to me, Rabbi Menachem, I've never told my child one thing. I never said anything to him. In fact, I would even tell him, now he's in 9th or 10th grade in yeshiva, he's doing really well. I didn't say, I want you to become a dayan, a judge, or I want you to become a world scholar of Torah. What I did tell him, maybe you should learn some carpentry or something like that, he says to him. So you're just not a spiritual guy. That's a good example of successful parenthood, not criticizing your child. However, there are times that it can work as a boomerang if you don't make any comments. Here, here we see that whenever he was with him, whenever improper things were made by Adoniah, he would never really criticize his son as saying that you're doing improper things. That's number one. Maybe the son thinks what? I am Pramadana. What am I? I'm perfect. I'm complete. I never made a mistake in my life. And the Tanakh tells us who tov toar. What does that mean that he's tov toar, gentlemen? He's a good-looking man. So what?
Charming.
He's charming. Good-looking, in other words, on a private level, he's fine-looking. Ve'oto yalda achrei Avshalom. So what? What does this have to do with becoming a king?
No, so it's Absalom also. They have very similar traits.
Oh, so they have similar traits, and that is often, but doesn't have to be. See the good-looking guy sitting next to me? Don't look at it. Don't look. Sometimes when you're so good-looking, that's an expression of your big soul, the light, the shining, how special you are, how the vitality you have, the inner light that you have, the vigor that you have to be influential over other persons. That was Avshalom that thought to rebel against David, and he died later. That's now Adonijah. So maybe people will buy it. He's such a good-looking man. It's a good sign of a big soul inside. And now we're told that he's the next son in line after what? After Avshalom. Well, what do you think, gentlemen? If Adonijah is the next child of Avshalom, he's next in line age-wise to take over after David HaMelech. Okay? So, look. He thinks, my father loves me. He never criticized me. Number one. Number two, I'm one of the 10 goodest looking, it was probably one of the magazines in Yerushalayim then, the top 10. Okay? I'm a good looking guy. I'm next one in line. And what he doesn't say, he has gava, he has a lot of pride. And that's a problem, having so much pride. And with this we'll continue tomorrow, B'ezrat Hashem.